The phone vibrated at 2:37 in the morning. Skylar's voice broke through the darkness, trembling like a muffled cry. Mom, I'm at the precinct. My husband hit me, and now he's reported that I attacked him. They believe him, not me. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and then she said something that made my whole body tighten with tension. There's an officer here on duty. He's nervous. He kept glancing at me as if he recognized me. Without thinking, I leapt out of bed, not turning on any lights and not wasting a second. I started the car, and the empty street sped past in a dark spinning blur beneath my tires. Skylar was still on the line, her breathing uneven, her tears held back. Darius has a cut on his arm, Mom. He told them I attacked him with a knife. There was blood on his shirt. He looked like an innocent victim. I clenched the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I knew that scene all too well. I had seen it 1,000 times. The abuser claiming victimhood and the victim turned criminal, but I never expected to hear those words from my own daughter. Which precinct? I asked, my voice sharp and cold. 10th Street, she replied through tears. 10th Street? My heart missed a beat. That precinct, that district, I picked up speed. The red light didn't matter. I went right through it. The quiet streets of the sleeping city had no right to hold me back. Not tonight. Not when my daughter was in a holding room, while her attacker wandered free with a fake injury and a rehearsed story. I reached there in 12 minutes. It should have taken 20. Nothing mattered. I double parked right in front of the entrance. The fluorescent lights of the precinct cut through the night like white blades. I pushed open the glass door. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and fear. A young officer was at the desk. He looked up when I entered. He saw me, and a change flickered across his face. His face paled. His hand froze halfway to the keyboard. His eyes widened as if he'd seen a ghost. Excuse me, he stammered. I didn't know what to say. The words caught in his throat. I looked at him silently, not speaking yet. I simply watched. In that quiet moment, in those 3 long seconds, I saw his throat move as he swallowed. I noticed his hands trembling slightly. I saw the recognition in his eyes. I saw the fear. Finally, I said, Officer, my voice breaking the silence like a final judgment from the bench. I am here to see my daughter, Skylar Hayes. You need to tell me exactly what is going on. Officer Miles, as his badge read, stood up so quickly that his chair toppled backward. Judge, he whispered. Judge. It had been 5 years since anyone had called me that, 5 years since I left the bench, but he recognized who I was. I saw the way his eyes flicked between my face and the hallway leading to the holding rooms. I understood that my presence had brought back the memory of something important to him. I didn't realize the detainee was your daughter, he continued softly. The husband was the first to file the report. He entered, bleeding, claiming she had attacked him. We followed the protocol. Protocol? I echoed, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. I took a step toward the counter. Miles instinctively stepped back. Where is my daughter now? He asked, his hand trembling as he pointed down the hall. Waiting room. We haven't booked her yet. Captain Cole is personally reviewing the case. He and Mr. Croft know each other. Of course they do. Men like Darius always have allies in easy-to-reach places. They know the captain, the judge, the prosecutor. They have a network that shields them while their victims struggle. Take me to her, I said firmly. Miles hesitated. He glanced toward a door at the end of the hall that was still shut. Behind that door were the captain and probably Darius, pretending to play golf with words, finalizing the official story, and deciding what would happen to Skylar, while she waited alone, frightened and confused about how her life had become a nightmare. Now, officer, I said firmly, and this time my request was clear. Miles nodded and led me down the corridor. Our footsteps echoed softly on the gray walls. Every sound brought back memories of the many hallways I had walked before, the countless cases I had worked on, and the many women I had known. But I never thought I would walk this corridor for my own daughter. Miles opened a door, and there she was, Skylar, sitting in a plastic chair, hunched over, hugging her knees tightly. She looked up when we entered. Her eyes were swollen, red, and empty of hope. But when she saw me, her face seemed to break apart. Mom, she whispered. Then she slowly stood up, stumbling toward me. I caught her as she collapsed into my arms. I could feel her body trembling with fear and exhaustion. I felt every sob that shook her chest. And I sensed something else, something that made my blood run cold, bruises. As she clung to me and hid her arm under the sleeve of her sweater, I noticed the dark outline of an old bruise, not from tonight, but from days, maybe even weeks ago. Carefully, I gently pulled the fabric back. Skylar tried to hide it, but it was too late. I saw the bruises spreading up her arm, like a map of violence. Finger marks, dark lines where someone had held her tightly many times. Skylar, I whispered, and my voice shook for the first time. How long? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't tell you, Mom. I couldn't. You've spent your whole life as a judge, helping women like me. I didn't want her to think I believed I'd failed, that I was too stupid to see the signs. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the pain in her voice. I held her even tighter. You didn't fail, I whispered into her ear. He failed. The system is failing right now, but I promise I won't fail you. I stepped back from her and looked at Miles, who was still standing in the doorway, watching the scene with a tense expression. Officer, I said, wiping tears from my face with the back of my hand. I need to see the complaint report. I need to speak with Darius Croft, and I want to talk to Captain Cole. Miles swallowed hard again. Judge Estelle, I recognize your face because you saved my sister 10 years ago. It was the Morales versus Morales case. You issued the protection order that kept her safe. I was 19 and in the courtroom when you sentenced that man. A heavy silence settled over us. Miles looked at me with a mix of respect and guilt. He continued, I didn't realize Miss Hayes was your daughter when they brought her in. Darius arrived first, bleeding but composed and persuasive. He claimed she had gone insane and attacked him for no reason, saying she needed psychiatric help. Captain Cole knows him from the country club. They were drinking coffee while they waited for us to bring your daughter in. Each word felt like a sharp point. Every detail confirmed what I already suspected. The system was set up to trust men like Darius. Where is he now? I asked. Miles pointed down the hall to the office door. In the captain's office, giving his official statement. I turned back to Skylar. I took her face gently in my hands. Look at me, I said. She obeyed, her eyes filled with fear and shame. This night will end differently. Do you hear me? This will not be like the other cases you've seen fail. I know every trick, every lie, every manipulation. I knew exactly how to break them down. Something shifted in her gaze, just a small spark, fragile as glass. Hope. I turned toward the door, toward the hallway in the office where Darius was weaving his web of lies. I started walking. Miles followed. Judge, the captain won't, he began to say. I cut him off without turning around. Captain Cole is going to listen to what I have to say, and once I finish, he'll wish he never had coffee with Darius Croft. My steps echoed steadily, full of resolve. I carried with me 34 years of experience, knowledge of every loophole in the law and every weakness in false accusations. I reached the office door without knocking and pushed it open. Captain Cole looked up from his desk. Darius sat calmly across from him, leaning back as if he were in his own living room. He was dressed impeccably, a white dress shirt, black slacks, and a watch worth over $5,000 shining on his wrist. A neat bandage covered his left forearm. He appeared tired and worried, the picture of a perfect victim. When he saw me step inside, his expression shifted. First surprise, then calculation, and finally that smile. The one I'd seen before in men who thought they could manipulate any situation. Estelle, he said, rising with an artificial politeness. I didn't expect to see you here. His voice was smooth and steady, like velvet over knives. How could I not be here? I replied, closing the door behind me. My daughter is detained because you beat her, and then you had the nerve to file a false report. Cole stood up as well, hands raised as if trying to calm a situation that was just starting. Estelle, I understand this is hard, but there are procedures we must follow. Darius entered first, with an injury. There is a protocol to adhere to. Protocol? I repeated, walking toward the desk. Let's discuss protocol then. Cole, did you conduct a complete forensic examination of my daughter's body? Did you check her for injuries? Did you photograph her wounds or just that superficial cut on Darius's arm? The captain blinked, his mouth opening slightly. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence said it all. Darius cleared his throat. Estelle, I know you're her mother, and this must be horrible for you. But Skylar isn't well. She has been under a lot of stress. She lost control tonight. I was only trying to defend myself. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the act, the carefully rehearsed posture, the eyes seeking sympathy, the hands moving with deliberate gestures. This man had practiced. He knew exactly how to look innocent, how to sound reasonable, how to turn the violence he caused into an episode of madness by his victim. How long have you been planning this, Darius? I asked, and my voice was icy. How long have you been preparing this story? A week? A month? Since when did you decide that if Skylar ever tried to leave, you'd turn her into a criminal? His mask wavered, just for a second, a flicker. But I saw it. I don't know what you're talking about, he replied. Now his voice had an edge. I'm here because my wife attacked me with a knife. I have the injury. I have witnesses who heard the commotion. I have the right to file a report. I stepped closer. Cole tried to intervene, but I ignored him. Witnesses, I asked. Which witnesses, Darius? The neighbors who called the police? The same ones who have heard screaming from your condo for months. Those witnesses. The color drained from his face. Just barely. Almost unnoticeably. But it was there. The neighbors have nothing to do with this, he stammered. I smiled, but it was not a kind smile. Oh, but they do have everything to do with it. Because when Miles takes their statements, they will tell a very different story from yours. They will talk about the nights they heard Skylar begging you to stop. They will mention the pounding against the walls, the broken dishes, the day they saw her with a black eye, and you said she had fallen. Darius sat down. The mask was starting to crack. Cole cleared his throat. Estelle, I appreciate your concern, but this is not a courtroom. You can't simply come in here and question. I can't. I interrupted him, turning to face him. Cole, I have known you for 20 years. We have worked together on various cases. We first teamed up when you were just starting out as an officer. So there's something I want to remind you of, and I hope you remember it. If you handle my daughter's case without doing a thorough investigation, without examining her properly, speaking to all the witnesses, and gathering all the facts, I will personally take legal action against you. I will also make sure that every judge, prosecutor, and officer in this city knows that your friendship with an abuser has influenced your judgment. The silence in that office was complete. Cole looked at me with wide eyes. Darius had completely lost his composure. His jaw was clenched, and his hands gripped the arms of his chair tightly. This is intimidation, he whispered. No, I said evenly. This is justice, something you have been avoiding for a long time. I turned my attention back to Miles, who still stood in the doorway. Officer, I need you to do something for me. Take Skylar to the hospital right now. A thorough forensic examination of her body, photographs of all her injuries, and a detailed medical report. Miles looked at Cole, hoping for approval. The captain was stunned, unsure of what to do. His friend from the country club was being torn apart right before his eyes. His usual confident version of events was falling apart. Finally, Cole weakly said, "Do it." Miles nodded and hurried out. Darius suddenly stood up. This is absurd. I'm the victim here. I have a genuine wound. Skylar's making things up. Making up what? I cut in. The bruises that are weeks old, the ribs that are likely fractured, the burns on her back. I saw his eyes widen in surprise. I had said too much. I mentioned the burns, something he thought no one knew about, something Skylar had hidden from me until tonight. How? He started to ask, but stopped himself. It was too late. Cole had noticed it too. Burns? The captain asked slowly. Darius quickly recovered. I don't know what she's talking about. She is inventing reasons to protect her daughter. But the crack was already there, and I was about to widen it into an abyss. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. It answered on the third ring. Jordan, I said, my oldest daughter, Skylar's sister. Mom, what's going on? It's 3 so in the morning. Her voice sounded sleepy and confused. Jordan, I need you to come to the 10th Street precinct right away. Skylar is here. Darius hit her and filed a false report. I need you to bring something with you. There was a pause, then I heard movement, bed sheets, quick footsteps. What do you need? She asked, and now her voice was firm. The flash drive, the one Skylar gave you 2 months ago, the one she asked you to keep safe. Another silence. This one heavier. Mom, how do you know about that? She asked. Because I know my daughter, I replied. Because I understand that women in situations like this always find ways to protect themselves. They always leave hidden evidence. They always have a plan to escape. Bring it now. I ended the call. Darius looked pale. What flash drive? He asked, voice shaking. I offered a faint smile. The one with the recordings. Darius. Skylar's recordings from the past 3 months. Every threat, every time you hit her, every statement suggesting no one would believe her over you. It was a bluff. I didn't know for sure if that flash drive existed, but I understood the pattern. I knew how victims often behave, and I knew Skylar. My daughter was clever. Frightened, yes. Trapped, yes. But smart. And at that moment, Darius had just lost all color in his face. I knew I had guessed correctly. That's illegal, he stammered. Recording without permission is admissible evidence in domestic violence cases. I cut him off. You would know that if you paid attention to the laws instead of trying to find ways around them. Cole sank into his chair. He was finally beginning to understand. He was finally beginning to see what was truly in front of him. A man who had planned everything, who had hurt himself, who had arrived early to steer the story, and who had connection to make sure his version was the official one. The captain spoke slowly. I think you should contact your lawyer. Darius looked at him in shock. What? Cole, we're friends. We play golf every Thursday. You know my character. You know I don't know anything. Cole cut him off, and for the first time that evening, I heard genuine authority in his voice, and that was the problem. Just then, the door swung open. Miles hurried inside. Captain, the ambulance is here to take Miss Hayes to the hospital. The paramedics say she shows signs of trauma, bruises at different healing stages, possible broken ribs, and marks on her wrists. Each word struck like a blow. Darius sank into his chair. His perfect world, his perfect plan was falling apart. Miles glanced at me briefly and said, The neighbors from apartment 203 and 205 are here. They mentioned they heard the call on the radio and want to give their statements. They believe it's important. I nodded. Let them in. 2 people entered, an older woman in a housecoat and a tired-looking man, probably around 50 years old. I recognized them as residents of Skylar's building, likely officers. The woman, Miss Evelyn Tate, spoke right away. We came to tell the truth. That man, she pointed at Darius, has been abusing that poor girl for months. We've heard everything, the screams, the banging, the begging. She continued, we contacted the police 3 times. She added, but every time you arrived, he told you everything was fine and you left. The man, Mr. Leonard Bell, nodded in agreement. Tonight was different. We heard glass break. We heard Skylar scream that he was going to kill her. Then everything went silent. We saw him leave with his arm bleeding, walking calmly as if nothing had happened. That's not how someone behaves after being attacked. That's the behavior of someone executing a plan. Darius suddenly stood up. You don't know anything. You weren't inside the apartment. You didn't see it. We saw enough. The woman interrupted him. And this time, we won't stay silent. Darius opened his mouth to respond, but Cole raised his hand. Enough. The captain rubbed his temples. He looked as if he had aged 10 years in just 20 minutes. Miles, gather complete statements from these witnesses, every detail, every date they recall, every call they made. He then turned to Darius. And you stay here. You're not leaving until this is resolved. I watched Darius's mask finally break apart completely. His elegant composure vanished. This is a conspiracy, he spat out. You're all against me because she, he said, pointing a trembling finger at me, is a former judge. She has influence. She's manipulating you. No, I replied in a cold, steady voice. You are the one who manipulates. I am only revealing the truth. I left the office knowing I didn't need to see any more. Darius could yell all he wanted. His words no longer had any control over me. The evidence would speak for itself, and evidence never lies. I headed down the corridor to where they had taken Skylar. Paramedics were carefully placing her onto a stretcher. She looked so small and delicate. I stepped closer and took her hand. "I'm coming with you," I told her. She nodded and grasped my fingers tightly, just like when she was a child and afraid of storms. The hospital was about 12 minutes away. Throughout the ride, Skylar didn't say a word. She just stared at the ceiling of the ambulance with vacant eyes. I kept hold of her hand the whole time. The paramedic, a young man around 30, checked her vital signs with a serious look. "How long?" he asked quietly. I didn't need to ask what he meant. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Months, maybe more than a year." He nodded and made notes on his tablet. "I have seen many cases, but this one is particularly severe. Injuries at various stages of healing reveal an ongoing pattern of abuse." We arrived at the emergency room, where the bright lights felt almost like a jolt. Skylar was taken straight into an exam room. A middle-aged doctor, with her hair pulled back, Dr. Amani Jones, entered almost immediately. "I'm Dr. Jones," she said, glancing briefly at me before turning her attention to Skylar. "I'll do a thorough examination. Is it okay if your mother stays with you?" Skylar nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes, I want her to stay." The doctor began the inspection. Every time she found a new injury, her expression grew more serious. There were bruises on her arms, ribs, and back, circular marks on her wrists where something had been tied, and small burns on her lower back, old cigarette burns. Skylar winced when the doctor gently touched the scars. "When did this happen?" the doctor asked quietly, her tone professional but caring. "3 months ago," Skylar whispered. "He was angry because dinner wasn't ready when he came home. He said he needed to teach me discipline." I closed my eyes. Each word felt like a dagger. Every confession revealed how blind I had been, how many signs I had missed, how many times Skylar had sat across from me, smiling, lying, trying to protect me from the truth, because she didn't want to disappoint me. Dr. Jones took photographs of every injury. She carefully documented everything. Finally, she said, "I'm going to order x-rays. I need to check the ribs, and I want you to talk with our social worker." She then left the room. Skylar and I were left alone. The silence was thick and heavy. "I'm sorry, Mom," she finally whispered. "I should have told you." I didn't interrupt her. "Don't apologize. None of this is your fault." I sat on the edge of the bed. "Why didn't you tell me, Skylar? Why did you let it go so far?" Tears streaked down her face. "Because you have spent your entire career saving many women, dedicating your life to protecting victims of domestic violence. I ended up becoming one of them. I felt such shame, such foolishness. I believed that if I told you, you would see me differently. You might think I had failed, that I hadn't learned anything from your lessons." Her voice broke as she sobbed. I held her gently, careful not to press on her bruised areas. "Listen to me," I said calmly. "You did not fail. He failed. The system failed. I failed for not recognizing what was happening. But you survived, and that strength is greater than what most people carry their entire lives." Suddenly, the door swung open. Jordan rushed in like a storm, hair untidy, coat thrown over her pajamas. In her hand, she held a small black flash drive. Skylar gasped. She ran toward the bed and hugged her sister so tightly that both of them started crying. "I brought it," Jordan said, showing me the flash drive. "I haven't listened to all of it. I couldn't. But there are hours of recordings. Skylar gave it to me 2 months ago. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would turn it over to the police. I took the flash drive. It was small and lightweight, but it carried the weight of months of fear and doubt." "Why didn't you come to me with this before?" I asked Skylar. She wiped away her tears because I was scared. "Darius always warned that if I left him or tried to report him, he would destroy me. He said he had contacts and that no one would believe me, that he was Darius Croft, a respected businessman, and I was just his unstable wife. He told me if I spoke out, he would ensure I lost everything: my job, my family, my freedom." She took a shaky breath. "That night, he lost control more than ever. He broke a bottle, wounded himself with the glass, and then I saw something in his eyes. I saw he was about to kill me, So for the first time in months, I fought back. I fought for real. And his wound? I asked. Skylar looked down. I had tried to take the glass away from him. He hurt himself in the struggle, but it was just a small scratch, nothing serious. Still, when he saw the blood, he smiled. He looked at his mother and said, "Mom," then added, "Now I'm going to the police. I'll tell them you attacked me, and when they arrest you, you'll finally understand your place." She shivered. He picked up the phone and called the police. They arrived in about 8 minutes. By that time, he had already wrapped his wound and practiced what he would say. The officers saw him in his suit and calm demeanor, and they looked at me, trembling and tearful. I understood they would believe him. Jordan squeezed his sister's hand, but he didn't expect Mom. She smiled through her tears. No one ever counts on Estelle Hayes when someone hurts her family. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket. I was heading back to the station. I needed to give it to them. I had to make sure Darius stayed there until they processed him properly. Skylar sat up quickly, panic in her eyes. "Mom, he has a lawyer, Randall Quinn. He's the best defense attorney in the city," she said. "He called him before you even arrived. He's planning to get out soon." But I told him firmly, "He's not leaving this time." "Not this time," I said softly as I kissed her forehead. "Jordan is staying with you. You're not alone anymore." Then I left the room. The hospital corridor was quiet, almost 5 in the morning. I picked up the phone and called Miles. He answered right away. "Judge Estelle, I have more evidence," I told him. "Recordings. Is Darius still there?" There was a pause. "Yes." "His lawyer, Randall Quinn, arrived 20 minutes earlier. He's insisting we release his client. He claims there's no probable cause, that Darius's injury is enough proof of assault, and that the neighbors' testimonies are circumstantial." Of course, I knew Randall Quinn, a smooth, costly, and unethical lawyer. He defended anyone who could pay his 1,000 or hourly rate. "Tell Cole I'm on my way, and tell him not to process anything until I arrive." I hung up. Dawn was beginning to break on the horizon. I got into my car. The streets were beginning to stir. Early morning workers, delivery trucks, and the city slowly coming back to life. But I was still caught in a struggle. The fight was not yet over. I reached the precinct as the sun barely lit the sky, with shades of orange and pink. The smell of freshly baked bread drifted from the corner bakery. Life was moving on normally, ordinary people starting their typical days. Yet I was returning to that building where my daughter had been treated like a criminal, where her attacker had sat down with the captain for coffee as if they were old friends. I pushed open the glass door. The shift had changed. New officers were behind the desk, but Miles was still there. When he saw me, something in his face told me matters had gotten worse. "Judge," he said softly, stepping closer, "Randall Quinn is pushing hard. He warned me that Quinn was threatening to sue the department for illegal detention. He claims Darius is the real victim and insists that we are influenced by his connection to you." I held the flash drive tightly in my pocket. "Where are they now?" Miles nodded toward the same office as before. "Cole is there with them. He looks unwell. Judge Randall is skilled at his work. He's methodically breaking down every argument. He explains that the neighbors only heard noises but didn't see anything. He suggests Skylar's injuries might have been self-inflicted or caused by another incident. The only clear physical evidence is the cut on Darius's arm." I started walking toward the office. My footsteps sounded deliberate, like sentences. Miles followed behind me. "There's something else," he added nervously. "Randall has already contacted a friendly judge. He has a preliminary release order ready to sign if we don't present solid charges within the next 2 hours. 2 hours. The system, meant to protect the innocent, is now being used to set the guilty free." I opened the door without knocking. Randall Quinn was standing beside Darius, dressed sharply in a dark gray suit that probably cost $3,000. His hair was perfectly combed, and a leather briefcase sat on the desk. He looked at me with those calculating eyes I had seen in many lawyers who cared more about profit than justice. "Estelle Hayes," he said with a polished smile, "I should have guessed you'd be involved. Your daughter assaulted my client, and somehow you've turned this into a media spectacle," he continued, speaking in a condescending tone, as if addressing a child who didn't understand. "Your client," I responded firmly, "beat my daughter for months. Tonight, he tried to kill her, then cut himself to create an alibi." Randall chuckled softly, in a professional manner. Those are serious accusations. Do you have any proof? Because I have an injured client, a wife with a history of erratic behavior, according to him, and no forensic evidence to support your story. I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and placed it sharply on Cole's desk. Here's your proof. An eerie silence settled over the room. Randall examined the flash drive. Darius's face turned pale. What is that? The lawyer asked, though his voice showed some hesitation. Recordings, I replied. Months of secret recordings Skyla made. Every threat, every punch, every time your client warned her that if she left him, he would ruin her. Every instance where he told her that no one would believe her because he was Darius Croft and she was nobody. Darius suddenly stood up. Those recordings are illegal. They can't be used in court. I didn't give my permission, he said. Randall raised his hand to stop him, but it was too late. Cole connected the flash drive to his computer. In cases of domestic violence, the captain said quietly, glancing at the screen, recordings made by victims in their own home can be used as evidence, especially when there's a genuine concern for their safety. He clicked, and the audio started to play. Darius's voice echoed through the cold office, cold and cruel, a stark contrast to the thoughtful man who had been there hours earlier. If you tell anyone, Skylar, you'll regret it. Do you really believe your mother will come to your rescue? Or do you think anyone would believe me, either a respected businessman or you, a hysterical wife? There was the sound of something breaking, a muffled scream. Quiet. Shut up. Or it will get worse. More noises, thuds, sobs. This is your fault. All of it is your fault. If you had been a better wife, I wouldn't have to do this. Cole paused the recording. His face was pale and tense. Randall had lost all his calmness and composure. There's more, I said. Hours of it. Different dates, all marked with timestamps, all something we can verify. Randall quickly steadied himself. This could be altered, edited. We'll need forensic audio analysis to verify its authenticity. I agreed. And while they check, Darius stays in custody without bail because we've just heard direct threats to his life. Because we have medical reports matching the dates on these recordings and witnesses confirming a pattern of abuse. I looked at Darius. He was trembling. His mask of calm had completely fallen away. He was no longer the respected businessman. He was simply a frightened man who understood that his world was falling apart. Anything to say now, Darius? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes flicked between Randall, Cole, and me, searching for an escape that wasn't there. I want to speak with my lawyer privately. He finally mumbled something. Cole nodded. Miles, take Mr. Croft to the interrogation room. Mr. Quinn can go with him. When they left, the captain sank into his chair. He looked worn out and ashamed. Estelle, I didn't know. Darius and I played golf together. He seemed like a good man. I never saw this coming. You never saw it, I interrupted. Because you didn't want to see. Because it was easier to believe the man in the expensive suit than the frightened woman. Cole rubbed his face. You're right. I failed. I should have done a full check from the start. I should have listened to the neighbors months ago when they called. I should have. You should have. I nodded in agreement, but now you can make it right. Processed D refers to Darius, facing charges for full charges, aggravated assault, felony battery, threats, continuous domestic abuse, and efforts to prevent him from getting bail. He nodded slowly. I will, he said. I'll call the assistant district attorney on duty. He picked up the phone. With this evidence, there's no doubt a judge will deny him bail. While he dialed, I looked out the window. The sun was already high in the sky. A new day had begun, but I felt as if I had lived an entire week in just one night. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. It was Jordan. Mom, the x-rays are back. Skylar has 2 fractured ribs, an old fracture in her wrist that never healed properly, and signs of old head trauma. The doctor says these injuries are consistent with repeated hits over several months. I closed my eyes, and each word echoed as a confirmation of my worst fears. How is she? I asked. She's sedated. They gave her something for the pain and shock. She's sleeping now. But Mom, before she drifted off, she told me something. She said Darius had videos of her in compromising situations. He claims he drugged her and recorded those moments, using the recordings to blackmail her. He threatened to publish them online if she left him. The anger I felt at that moment was like molten lava, hot, relentless, and destructive. Where are those videos, Jordan? On his computer in his home office. Skylar says he keeps them there as insurance. I hung up with Jordan and turned back to Cole. I needed a search warrant for Darius's apartment and his office immediately. The captain looked up. Why? Because there was more evidence, proof of extortion, sexual abuse, crimes that went beyond just physical violence. Cole swallowed hard and nodded. I'll call the duty judge. 30 minutes later, we had the warrant. Miles and 2 other officers prepared to leave for the condo. I said, I'm going with you. Miles hesitated. Judge, technically, you're an interested party. Your presence could compromise the case. I cut him off. I don't care. That is the house where my daughter was subjected to terrible cruelty. I am leaving now. He didn't argue anymore. We got into the patrol cars. The building where Skylar had lived her nightmare was just 15 minutes away. It was a modern, high-rise apartment with a doorman and well-maintained gardens. No one would ever suspect the horrors happening behind those doors. The doorman recognized us, and his face looked uneasy. Going to Darius Croft's apartment? Miles asked. He nodded. We had a search warrant. The doorman lowered his voice. That poor woman, Miss Hayes, always gentle and smiling, but I knew Dorman always knew. We'd see her go in happy and come out with red eyes. He would be kind to her in public, yet look at her coldly when he thought no one was watching. He handed us the master key and we took the elevator. We reached the 12th floor, condo 1203. The door swung open, revealing a perfectly neat space with modern furniture, artwork on the walls, and a stunning view of the city. It was like a gilded cage where Skylar had been held captive. As I stepped inside, the scent of expensive cologne greeted me. Everything was spotless, almost too perfect. It looked like a stage designed to impress visitors. Abstract paintings hung on the walls, a pristine area rug, and a cream-colored leather sofa that probably cost $10,000. But I didn't see luxury. I saw a prison. I saw the place where my daughter had endured suffering in silence, while the world outside believed she was living a perfect life. Miles and the other officers began methodically searching the apartment. The office is in the back, I said, recalling the few times I had visited this place. Skylar always preferred we meet at my house. Now I understood why. Darius's office was exactly as I'd imagined, a dark wooden desk, shelves lined with books he probably never read, framed diplomas on the wall, photographs of him shaking hands with notable figures, politicians, businessmen, judges, a carefully maintained network of influence. Miles powered up the computer, but it was password protected. We'll need technical support to get in, he began to say. Try his date of birth. I suggested that men like Darius were predictable, arrogant. They believed no one would dare intrude on their space. Miles tried. It didn't work. Entering the wedding anniversary didn't help either. Then I remembered something Skylar had once mentioned. Try his company name, followed by the year it was founded. Miles typed it in. The computer unlocked. Of course, for Darius, his business was more important than any personal relationship. Miles began browsing through files, carefully organized folders, contracts, financial records, and then he found it. A hidden folder without a name, only a symbol. Miles clicked. My stomach clenched. Dozens of videos, some dating back more than a year. I told him quickly, don't watch them. Just note that they're there. We need to keep the chain of evidence intact. This will go to trial. Miles nodded and took photos of the screen. He then called the cybercrimes unit. I need you to come down. While we waited, I continued to search the office. I opened drawers and filing cabinets. In the third drawer of a desk, I found something that made my blood run cold, a thick manila folder. I opened it and saw photographs, images of Skylar taken without her knowing. Some showed her in the shower, sleeping, changing clothes, and others were documents. Among the papers were Skylar's private medical records that Darius had obtained unlawfully, reports from her workplace, and psychological evaluations he had manipulated to make her seem unstable. I called Miles. He arrived quickly, and I showed him what I had found. His face grew darker with concern. This is systematic stalking, illegal surveillance, and identity theft. This is control, I said. Darius didn't just hit her. He observed her closely. He kept detailed records of every part of her life and compiled a complete file to use against her if she ever tried to escape. I discovered more copies of emails between Darius and Randall Quinn from 6 months earlier. In those messages, Darius discussed plans to discredit Skylar if she became a problem. They discussed casting doubt on her mental health, creating fake evidence of infidelity, and using his contacts to damage her professional reputation. It was a carefully thought out plan designed to ruin her. The cybercrime technicians arrived and started copying the entire hard drive, every file, document, and video. One of them, a young woman with a serious look, came over to me. "Ma'am, what's on this computer is enough for multiple federal charges: extortion, non-consensual pornography, and cyberstalking. This man is a systemic predator." I nodded. I knew it. I always sensed it on some level. But seeing the physical evidence in front of me made it real. It was undeniable. "How much longer do you need," I asked, "for the full analysis?" "Days," she replied. "But to find the main points and prepare the initial charges, just a few hours." I left the office and stepped outside for some air. I went onto the balcony. The view was stunning. The city stretched out like a living map. From up here, everything appeared orderly and perfect, but I knew the truth. Behind every window, behind every door, there were different stories, some joyful, others dark, like Skylar's. My phone vibrated. Cole Estelle Darius is insisting on seeing a judge. Randall is filing a motion for habeas corpus, claiming the detention is unlawful. I smiled, but it was without humor. "Tell Randall that we now have more evidence, videos, documents, and proof of a planned scheme involving abuse and extortion. In just a few hours, his client will face federal charges along with the state cases." There was silence on the line. Then Cole exhaled heavily. Darius just lost control. When we mentioned the search warrant, he began shouting. He insisted that everything on that computer was private, and we had no right to access it. Randall tried to calm him, but Darius kept talking. He essentially admitted there was compromising material without us even asking. I let out a bitter laugh. Criminals always reveal themselves, always. "Keep a recording of that spontaneous confession. Randall will try to suppress it, but hopefully the judge will allow it as evidence." I ended the call. Miles stepped out to join me on the balcony. "All of this is documented. The computer will go to the lab for analysis. The physical documents are being entered into evidence." "Good," I said. "Let's go back. I want to be present when they formally process Darius." We went downstairs, and the doorman stopped us in the lobby. "Did you find anything?" he asked quietly. I shouldn't have answered him. It was an active investigation, but something in his expression made me speak. "We discovered enough to ensure he never hurts anyone again," I said. The doorman nodded slowly. "Good. That Miss Hayes deserved justice. We all knew it here, but no one had done anything, including myself." I felt ashamed. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Now you can do something. If the case goes to trial, they will need witnesses, people who saw, heard, and can confirm the pattern. We'll tell everything," he promised. Back at the precinct, the sun was high in the sky. I had been awake all night, but I didn't feel tired. Instead, I felt a sense of purpose. We went inside. The atmosphere had shifted. Officers were speaking softly. There were more people present. A woman in a formal suit was at the counter. She recognized me immediately. "Judge Hayes," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Assistant District Attorney Aisha Reynolds. Captain Cole has briefed me on the case. I was already familiar with her reputation, tough, intelligent, with a remarkable record of convictions in domestic violence cases. I need to go through all the evidence," she continued. "The recordings, medical reports, and witnesses' testimonies. If this is as strong as they told me, I will ask for detention without bail." "It is solid," I reassured her. "And there's more. We recently confiscated a computer containing evidence of additional crimes: extortion, revenge, pornography, and ongoing harassment." Patricia's eyes sparkled, not with happiness, but with determination. "Perfect. I intend to lock this man away so deeply he'll never see the outside again." I admired her straightforward approach. "Clear, no fuss." Where is Darius now? I inquired. In interrogation room 3. Randall is with him. They're waiting for the bail hearing. Patricia checked her watch. It will be in 2 hours. There was enough time for me to prepare my case. I turned to Miles. Officer, I need certified copies of everything, every recording, every photograph, every statement. I want them on my desk within an hour. I sat down in a chair in the hallway, feeling the heavy weight of exhaustion. I closed my eyes briefly, just for a moment, and saw Skylar's face. Not the frightened face from tonight, but her childhood face. Smiling, running, feeling free. My phone vibrated, breaking into my thoughts. It was Jordan. Mom, Skylar woke up. She's asking for you. She wants to know what happened to Darius. I stood up. Tell her I'm on my way. Tell her Darius isn't getting out. Tell her this time the system worked. I drove back to the hospital. The morning traffic was heavy, office workers rushing to their jobs, mothers taking children to school. Life continued normally all around my personal distress. I reached the hospital, took the elevator to the 4th floor. Skylar's room was at the end of the corridor. I knocked softly before entering. Skylar was sitting upright in bed, still pale and with visible marks on her face, but her eyes showed something new. It was not the desperate emptiness from last night. Instead, there was a faint glimmer of hope, fragile but real. Jordan sat beside her, holding her hand. Mom, Skylar said when she saw me. Her voice was hoarse and tired. It's true. They really found everything. I moved to the other side of the bed. Yes, we found it all. The recordings you made, the videos he recorded, the documents, everything. Darius is in custody. The prosecutor is asking that he be denied bail. Tears streamed down her face, but they were different this time. Not tears of fear, but of relief. I can't believe it's finally over, she whispered. I lived with so much fear for such a long time. Every morning I woke up wondering if that day would be the one he hurt me. Every night I fell asleep praying I would survive until morning. Jordan gently squeezed her hand. You don't have to live like that anymore. Skylar nodded. Then she looked at me with eyes filled with guilt. Mom, all my life I helped women like me, and I couldn't even help myself. I feel so ashamed. No, I said firmly, taking her other hand. Listen to me, Skylar. What you went through wasn't weakness. It was survival. You did what was necessary to stay alive. You recorded evidence. You handed it over to Jordan. You even planned your escape, even when it looked impossible. That isn't shame. That's strength. Skylar sobbed. But I knew I should have left sooner. I should have. There is no should have, I interrupted her. Victims of abuse leave whenever they find the chance, not when others think they should. The right time is when you make it out alive, and you did. Jordan hugged us both. 3 generations of women. Broken, but not defeated. Dr. Jones entered with a large folder. Good morning. I came to see how you're doing. She checked Skylar's vital signs, examined her, and replaced her bandages. The ribs will likely ache for several weeks. You will need pain relief and plenty of rest. The bruises will gradually heal, and the scars on your skin will fade over time. She paused briefly. But it's important to get professional help for the wounds that aren't visible. We have highly qualified trauma therapists who can assist you. I strongly advise you to begin a therapy as soon as you can. Skylar nodded solemnly. I will. I don't want to face this alone anymore. The doctor smiled kindly. Good. I've also spoken with social workers. There are safe shelters available if you need a temporary place to stay while putting your life back in order. There are options for restraining orders and free legal help. You're not alone in this, remember? She handed her a list of support resources, emergency phone numbers, support groups, and crisis lines available around the clock. Thank you, Skylar said softly. The doctor left the room. Silence settled over us, but it was not heavy with fear. Instead, it was filled with a sense of hope, of a future waiting to unfold. My phone vibrated. Miles, Judge, the bail hearing begins in 30 minutes. Aisha is ready. Is she coming? I replied, I'm coming. I looked at Skylar. The bail hearing is in half an hour. Do you want me to stay here with you, or should I go and make sure they don't release him? Skylar took a deep breath. Go. I need to know he's not getting out, that he's not coming to find me. I kissed her forehead. He's not getting out, I promise. Jordan walked with me to the elevator. Mom, thank you for believing, for fighting, for not giving up. I hugged her. That's what mothers do. They always protect their daughters. I went down to the parking lot and drove back to the courthouse. The courthouse was familiar. I had spent many years walking those halls, issuing sentences, changing lives, but I had never been on this side before, never as a member of a victim's family. The courtroom was on the third floor. I entered. Aisha was already there, reviewing documents. She saw me and nodded. Darius was sitting with Randall, still dressed in yesterday's clothes, now wrinkled and unkempt. He was unshaven, with red eyes, and the confident facade of a successful businessman had completely disappeared. When I entered, I saw something cross his face. Hatred. Pure bitter hatred mixed with fear. I watched him swallow hard and turn his gaze away. The judge then entered. All rise. Judge Sterling. I recognized him. We had worked together years ago. He was fair and strict, not one to tolerate manipulation. The clerk announced, the case of the state versus Darius Croft. Aisha rose to her feet. Your Honor, the state requests detention without bail. The defendant is facing charges of aggravated assault, felony battery, threats, ongoing domestic abuse, extortion, cyberstalking, and non-consensual pornography. He is a clear danger to the victim and to the community. Randall then stood up. Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman with no criminal history. He has strong ties to the community and is not a flight risk. Detention without bail is too harsh under these circumstances. Judge Sterling examined the documents before him. Prosecutor, do you have evidence to support these charges? He asked. Aisha opened her briefcase. I have audio recordings in which the defendant clearly threatens the victim. Medical reports show injuries at various stages of healing consistent with ongoing abuse. Testimonies from neighbors confirm the pattern of behavior. Digital evidence recovered from the defendant's home demonstrates planned abuse and extortion, while forensic photographs taken this morning reveal the seriousness of the latest attack. The judge held out his hand. Aisha gave him a folder, and he started to review the contents. The courtroom was completely silent, with only the sounds of pages turning. Judge Sterling looked up with a serious expression. Mr. Croft, please stand. Darius rose to his feet, visibly trembling. I have reviewed the preliminary evidence presented by the prosecutor. The judge stated it is one of the most thorough and unsettling collections I have encountered in cases of domestic violence. He paused. The recordings alone are enough to justify denying bail. The clear death threats, the well-documented pattern of controlling behavior, and the evidence of plans to undermine the victim if she sought help, all of this creates a picture of a very dangerous person. Randall tried to stop him. Your Honor, those recordings could be edited, he said. The judge held up his hand. Counsel, you will have the chance to challenge the evidence at trial, but for now I find there is enough probable cause to proceed. He then addressed Darius. Mr. Croft, bail is denied. You will stay in the county jail until your trial. The judge also issued a permanent restraining order. You cannot come within 500 feet of the victim, her family, her workplace, or her home. Any violation will lead to additional charges. Darius suddenly collapsed. He literally fell to the ground. Randall had to support him. No, 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 he stammered. This can't be real. I'm Darius Croft. I have rights. I have connections. This must be a mistake. The judge struck the desk sharply. Officer, remove the defendant. Two bailiffs moved forward, handcuffing Darius. He kept mumbling, denying that his perfect world, built on lies and control, was finally falling apart. They led him out of the room. His protest echoed down the hall. Aisha came over to me. It's a good start. Now comes the hard part, building the case for trial. But with all this evidence, I feel confident. I left the courtroom with a strange feeling I hadn't experienced in hours. Relief. It wasn't a victory yet. The trial was still ahead. Darius's lawyers would fight every step. But for now, Skylar was safe. Darius was in custody, exactly where he belonged. I walked through the courthouse corridors. I passed by rooms where I had handed down hundreds of sentences. I caught my reflection in a window. It looked like I had aged 10 years in a single night, but my eyes still burned with determination. Purpose. I wasn't finished. I called Jordan. Darius won't be released. The judge denied bail. I heard a gasp of relief, then weeping. Skylar is crying, but out of happiness. She says that for the first time in 2 years, she can breathe freely. My phone vibrated again, an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. It was Judge Hayes. A woman's voice, young and trembling, spoke. Yes. Who is this? There was a pause. My name is Chloe. Chloe Wilson. I saw the news about Darius Croft and his arrest. Something in her tone made me alert. How can I help you? Another pause, accompanied by ragged breathing. I told her I dated Darius 3 years ago, before he met your daughter, and he did the same to me. I closed my eyes. Of course, abusers don't start suddenly. They have a history, a pattern. Do you want to talk about it? I asked softly. Chloe's voice cracked as she replied, I need to talk about it. For 2 years, I lived in fear. He hit me. He controlled me. He had videos of me similar to those mentioned in the news. When I finally managed to escape, he threatened me, saying that if I spoke out, he would ruin my life. I believed him. He had money, contacts, and influence. So I stayed quiet, moved to another city, changed my phone number, and tried to forget. Her voice trembled, but I never forgot. When I heard that Darius was arrested, that someone finally believed one of his victims, I knew I had to speak up. I couldn't let him go free. I couldn't let him do this to another woman. Chloe, I said firmly, your testimony could be very important. Would you be willing to give a formal statement and testify? She hesitated. Will they protect me? Darius has friends and powerful people. If they find out I spoke, we will make sure you're protected, I assured her. And you are not alone. There are others who have suffered. Together, you are stronger than any of Darius's connections. Chloe took a deep breath. Okay, she said, I'll do it for your daughter, for myself, and for all the women he has hurt. I handed her Aisha's number and urged her to contact her right away. After I hung up, a cold feeling ran through me. How many more women had Darius hurt before Skylar? I headed back to the hospital. Skylar was still asleep. Jordan was sitting in the chair beside her reading. I softly asked how she was. She finally relaxed after I told her about the bail. The doctor said she could be released the next day if the follow-up x-rays showed no issues. I sat quietly watching her sleep. My girl, who had grown up too quickly, endured so much but had managed to survive. My phone vibrated again. It was Aisha Estelle. I had just spoken with Chloe Wilson. She explained, her testimony is invaluable. It confirms a pattern of behavior and proves Darius is a repeat offender. This significantly boosts our case. I smiled slightly. I asked nervously if there were more. Aisha responded that 2 additional women had reached out after seeing the news, both sharing similar experiences. Darius had met them, seduced them. Then the cycle of abuse, control, and violence began. Threats and extortion followed, using intimate material, just the same tactics as before. I felt sick inside. There were 5 victims I knew of, but how many more were too frightened to speak out? I suggested that all of them should come together. I told them to meet each other and realized they weren't alone. Aisha agreed and said she would organize a meeting. But then Estelle interrupted. There's something else. I looked at her sharply. Randall Quinn has resigned from the case. I straightened up in surprise. What? I asked. She explained. He has submitted a formal withdrawal citing a conflict of interest. That was unexpected. Randall never backed away from high-profile cases before. He loved the attention and the money involved. I wanted to know more. Why would he do that? I inquired. Aisha responded with a forced, humorless laugh, because one of the videos on Darius's computer links him to the situation. It turned out Randall had known about the intimate material all along. In fact, he had helped Darius come up with the extortion plan. He had used emails to discuss strategies for silencing the victims. My jaw tightened in anger. So Randall was an accomplice. That's right, and now he is facing an investigation by the State Bar Association. He risks losing his license. Justice at last. I asked who will defend Darius now. He was assigned a public defender, a young but capable lawyer, though without Randall's resources or connections. That worked in our favor. It meant Darius couldn't buy his way out or use influence to sway the system. He was exposed, vulnerable, just as he had made all his victims feel. The following days came quickly. Skylar was discharged from the hospital and stayed with me for the time being. She couldn't return to that condo yet, perhaps never. Jordan took time off work to be with her sister. We arranged therapy, support groups, and safe spaces where Skylar could begin to recover. Aisha set up a meeting with the other victims. It took place in a private room at the district attorney's office. When Skylar entered the room and saw the other four women, Chloe Wilson, Danielle Brooks, and the two others, something shifted. It was recognition. They did not know each other, but they saw themselves in one another. In each other's eyes, they saw their own pain reflected back. Chloe was the first to speak. I thought I was the only one. I believed there was something wrong with me, that I somehow caused his violence. The others nodded in agreement. One by one, they shared their stories. Though the details differed, the pattern was the same. Darius targeted strong, intelligent, successful women and gradually tore them down from within. Skylar listened quietly, tears falling down her face with each story. When it was her turn, her voice was almost a whisper. Thank you for your courage, for speaking out. Now I understand I'm not crazy, and it wasn't my fault. The five women embraced, strangers yet connected by shared pain and hope. By promising that this time the system would not let them down, that the abuser would face justice, Aisha watched from the back of the room. When they had finished, she approached. Ladies, what you have is powerful. 5 independent testimonies, 5 stories that follow the same pattern. This is not a coincidence. It's proof of a repeated predator. Preparation for the trial began, with depositions, interviews, and reviewing evidence. Every day revealed new details, more videos, more documents, further proof of Darius's systematic abuse. The public defender tried to negotiate, offering Darius the chance to plead guilty to lesser charges for a lighter sentence. Aisha refused. We're going to trial, she said, and we're going to win. 2 months later, the trial opened. The courtroom was full. Reporters, activists, and survivors of domestic violence had come to support. Skylar sat in the front row with Jordan and me. She was trembling, yet she was there, strong and determined. Darius was brought in handcuffs. There was no sign of the refined man I had once met. The time spent in prison had changed him. His eyes were sunken, his face gaunt. But what had changed the most was his posture. There was no longer any arrogance, only a sense of defeat. Aisha presented her case with careful precision. The recordings were played, the medical testimonies were shared, and the videos were explained without making them public to protect the victims. Every piece of evidence was like a strike against Darius. The public defender did his best to argue that the recordings were taken out of context, that the injuries could have been caused by other factors, but it was no use. The evidence was simply too strong. The most powerful moment came when Skylar took the stand. The courtroom grew quiet. She walked confidently, her head held high. She was no longer the fragile woman broken earlier that morning at the precinct. She was a survivor. Aisha gently guided her through her testimony. Can you tell us when the abuse started? Skylar took a deep breath. 3 months after we got married, it began with small incidents. First a shove, then a slap, always followed by apologies, flowers, and promises it would never happen again. But it always did, and each time it became worse. Why didn't you leave sooner? Aisha asked. That was the question everyone asked, but it's a question that doesn't really understand how complicated abuse can be. Skylar looked directly at the jury. I was afraid, because Darius controlled everything, my money, my friends, my job. He systematically isolated me until I felt like I had nowhere to turn. But when I finally worked up the courage to plan my escape, he discovered the recordings I had secretly made. He threatened to ruin me if I spoke out. He said he had friends in important places who wouldn't believe me. Her voice cracked, and he was almost right. When I called the police that night, they believed him, not me. The public defender stood up for cross-examination, attempting to sound assertive. Isn't it true that you have a history of anxiety? Schuyler nodded. Yes, I began experiencing severe anxiety after months of living in constant fear. And is it true that you sought psychiatric assistance? Yes, because my husband was mentally abusing me. The defender tried a different approach. Isn't it possible that some of these injuries were accidental? Schuyler looked at him directly. Accidental cigarette burns, accidental broken ribs, accidental ligature marks. Her voice grew louder. No, none of it was accidental. It was all purposeful, calculated, meant to break me. The lawyer stepped back, having no further questions. Schuyler left the witness stand. As she passed Darius, he tried to look at her, but she did not meet his gaze. He no longer held any control over her. Then the next victims took their turn. One by one, they stepped forward to share their experiences. Chloe described how Darius had isolated her from her family. He had convinced her that no one could love her the way he did. When she finally managed to escape, he followed her for months, continuously watching her. Danielle Brooks, another victim, described how Darius had destroyed her career. He had lied to her employer, sabotaging her projects and causing her to lose her job, merely to show he could control every part of her life. The pattern was clear. 5 women, 5 nearly identical stories, all recounting a cycle: seduction, isolation, control, violence, and threats. The jury listened intently, their faces growing more serious by the minute. Some members appeared to hold back tears. Aisha presented evidence from digital devices. A forensic expert detailed how Darius had kept detailed files of compromising material, how he used technology to spy on his victims, and how he developed a comprehensive system to keep them trapped. This case is far from an ordinary domestic violence situation. Aisha stated in her closing remarks, "This is a case involving a repeat offender who used his position, his wealth, and his connections to systematically prey on vulnerable women." She stepped in front of the jury. Darius Croft did not lose his temper in moments of anger. Rather, he maintained complete control. He planned carefully, documented his actions, and carried out a pattern of abuse that repeated with 5 known victims over many years. She pointed to the evidence boxes, the recordings they listened to, the medical reports they reviewed, and the witnesses' testimonies. All of these clearly show a man who knew exactly what he was doing and who committed these acts repeatedly without any remorse. She then looked directly at Darius. The defendant had many chances to stop. Each time a victim managed to escape, he simply found another. Whenever someone tried to report him, he used his influence to silence them. It wasn't until that morning that his plan finally fell apart. Aisha returned to the jury, knowing this time the victim had a mother who understood how the system works, a former judge who was aware of every trick Darius might try, and who would not allow another woman to be harmed. She paused. She believed that justice should not depend on having a judge as a mother, or on 5 victims speaking to be believed. One victim's testimony alone should suffice. One piece of evidence should be enough. And the evidence she pointed to in the boxes was more than enough to find Darius Croft guilty on all charges. The public defender did his best. He argued that Darius had anger management problems and needed help, not prison. He claimed the situation was more complicated than it appeared. But his words sounded empty. He could not explain the recordings, offer any defense against the recurring pattern, or argue against the overwhelming evidence. The jury then went to deliberate. We waited 3, 4, 5 hours. Every minute felt like an eternity. Schuyler gripped my hand tightly. "What if they find him not guilty?" she whispered. "They won't," I reassured her. "The evidence is too clear." But deep inside, I was filled with fear. I had seen strong cases fall apart. I had seen the guilty go free. I had witnessed the system fail far too many times. Finally, after 6 hours, the jury came back into the room. We all rose to our feet. The jury foreman, an older man with a stern look, held the paper with the verdict. Judge Sterling asked, has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor. How do you find the defendant on the charge of aggravated assault?" the judge inquired. The jury foreman looked straight at Darius. "Guilty." A sudden gasp echoed through the courtroom. On the charge of felony battery, guilty. On the charge of continuous domestic abuse, guilty. One after another, each charge was read, and each time the answer was the same: guilty, guilty, guilty. Darius slumped in his seat. His lawyer tried to offer comfort, but it was of no use. His world had officially fallen apart. Skylar broke down, tears streaming down her face. Jordan embraced her for support. The other victims in the courtroom also cried, but their tears were not from sadness. They were tears of relief, validation, and a sense that justice had finally been achieved. Judge Sterling pounded the gavel. Sentencing would be announced in 2 weeks. Afterward, we left the courtroom. Outside, journalists were waiting. Aisha gave a short statement. Today, the system had worked. 5 courageous women had spoken up, and a serial predator was declared guilty. This decision sends a clear message. Domestic abuse will not be accepted, no matter who you are or how much money you have. Skylar also spoke, her voice trembling but steady. She wanted other victims to know they're not alone, that their voices matter, and that justice is possible. It might take time and be difficult, but it's real. The 2 weeks until sentencing went by quickly. Slowly, Skylar began to rebuild her life. She returned to her job and moved forward. She found a new apartment, small but secure. Jordan helped her move. She decorated it with care. Finally, the day of the sentencing arrived. The courtroom was full once more. Darius was brought in handcuffs. He appeared defeated, broken. Judge Sterling reviewed the documents. Mr. Croft, you have been found guilty of several serious charges. I have looked over the president's reports. I have considered the systematic nature of your crimes, the coldness with which you harmed multiple women over the years. The judge looked directly at Darius. You exploited your position and resources to cause immense suffering. You ruined lives. You traumatized women who trusted you, and you did so without remorse. He paused. Therefore, I sentence you to 25 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for at least the first 15 years. Additionally, you will be required to register as a violent offender for life. The gavel struck the sound block. The sentence was final. 25 years. Darius was 42. By the time he was released, he would be an old man if he got out. Skylar closed her eyes. Tears flowed freely, but this time she was smiling through them. Jordan and I hugged her tightly. It was finally over. Several months later, life had settled into a new routine. Skylar had moved permanently into her apartment, a bright and cheerful place on the 3rd floor with large windows that let in plenty of sunlight. There were no shadows or dark corners where fear could hide. Jordan visited every weekend. They cooked together, shared laughs, and began to heal. I went to see her on Wednesdays. We sat on her small balcony, drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing. They started to talk about future plans and rekindled forgotten dreams that were beginning to come alive again. One Tuesday afternoon, Skylar called me. Mom, can you come over? There's something I want to show you. Her voice sounded different, lighter, more hopeful. I arrived within 20 minutes. When she opened the door, she was smiling, truly smiling, genuine, not forced or fake. Look, she said as she led me into her living room. On the table, there were papers. I recognized them instantly. The divorce decree, finally signed, processed, and sealed, arrived today. It's official. I am no longer married to him. She held the papers with hands that were no longer trembling. I'm free, Mom. Legally and officially free, I told her. And we embraced. I felt her body relax completely, something she hadn't done in years. I am so proud of you, I whispered, of your strength, your courage, and how you've managed to survive. She pulled back, wiping away happy tears. I didn't just survive. I am now truly living. For the first time since I met Darius, I feel alive again. She sat down on the sofa, and I began writing a book about what I had gone through. Aisha told me it could help other women, that my story might make a difference. She smiled softly. I'm not sure if it will be good, but I need to get it out. I want to turn this pain into something that can be useful. I sat beside her. It will be more than good, and it will be important because it's rooted in the truth and real experience. Skylar nodded. I began speaking at women's shelters and colleges, sharing about warning signs that often appear before physical violence. Sometimes abuse starts with isolation, control, or making someone doubt themselves rather than physical harm. She continued the other victims are also in the process of healing. Chloe established a nonprofit organization to support survivors. Danielle returned to her studies. We are all rebuilding our lives together. She took my hand gently. It all began because you never gave up. When I called that morning, you were there. You fought to protect me. You refused to let the system turn me away. I held her hand tightly. I did what any mother would do. She shook her head with a soft smile. No, she said, you did what an exceptional mother does. You used your knowledge, your experience, your strength, and you saved my life. We sat quietly, the kind of quiet that only comes after secrets have been revealed. When all the pain has been brought into the open and is starting to heal. My phone vibrated softly. Jordan, are you and she together? I'm on my way. I have news. She arrived about half an hour later, carrying a bottle of non-alcoholic wine and a bright, happy face. Do you remember I filed a formal complaint against Captain Cole? She asked. We had forgotten. With everything that had happened, the investigation into the captain had been put on hold. He was suspended without pay. A full investigation was underway for negligence and favoritism. Other cases are being reviewed as well. These involve situations where he may have let abusers go because they were his friends. It was about justice, late, but genuine. The system hadn't just failed, Skylar. It had let down dozens of women because a man in a position of authority chose friendship over his responsibilities. And there is more, Jordan added. Randall Quinn has lost his license permanently. The ethics board discovered that he had actively helped cover up crimes, not only with Darius, but with other clients too. I smiled. More pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Not only the abuser had paid the price, but his facilitators were also facing consequences. This is how it should have been from the start. Still, better late than never. We sat together, drinking coffee, eating pie that Jordan had brought, and talking about ordinary things, movies, books, vacation plans. For the first time in many years, we were simply a family without crisis or fear, just women who cared for each other, sharing a peaceful afternoon. As the sun began to set, I stepped onto the balcony. I looked out over the city, stretching toward the horizon, as lights flickered on and life persisted in countless windows. I wondered how many of those windows concealed the same kind of nightmare Skylar had endured. How many women were out there at this moment, frightened, trapped, unaware that there was a way out. Skylar joined me. What are you thinking about? She asked. I answered honestly, all the others. The women who do not have a former judge as a mother, who lack sisters to preserve evidence, and who face their struggles entirely alone. Skylar gazed out at the city as well. That's why I am writing this book. That's why I give talks, because I want them to know they are not alone, that help is available, and that there is hope. She turned toward me. Do you know what the strangest thing is? For months, I believed that if Darius went to prison, I would feel revenge and victory. But that's not what I feel. What do you feel? I asked. She paused for a moment. Peace. Simply peace. Because I no longer have to look over my shoulder. I don't have to pretend. I don't have to live in constant fear that someone will discover my secret. She smiled softly. I feel like myself again, like the Skylar before Darius, but stronger now because I know what I am capable of. I know I can survive even the worst and keep moving forward. I wrapped my arms around her in a hug. My girl, who had endured unimaginable hardships and emerged on the other side, not without scars. The scars were there, and they always would be, but they no longer defined her. That night, as I drove home, I reflected on everything that had happened. The call at 2:37 in the morning that changed everything. The precinct where Miles recognized my face and realized he had made a mistake. Darius, sitting in that office with his mask of the perfect victim. The recordings that exposed the truth. The other victims who found the strength to speak out. The verdict that finally delivered justice. And Skylar reconstructing her life step by step. That night, I learned something deeply important. For 34 years as a judge, I had protected thousands of women. I had handed down sentences. I had issued restraining orders. I had made a difference in many lives, but no sentence had ever meant as much to me as this one. Because this time, it wasn't just another case. It was my daughter, my blood, my heart. And I have come to understand that knowledge and experience mean little if you cannot use them to protect those you care about. That morning at the precinct, when I pushed open the door and saw the fear in Miles's eyes, I was there not as a judge, but as a mother determined not to let the system fail her daughter, a mother ready to face every obstacle, every corrupt connection, and every manipulation. Ultimately, that was enough, not because I am special, but because the truth is powerful when it is spoken aloud. I arrived home quietly, feeling empty, but not alone because I knew that miles away, Skylar was sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. Jordan was already planning her next visit. The other victims were still healing, and Darius was exactly where he needed to be, paying the price for every life he had taken. I poured myself a cup of tea, settled into my favorite chair, closed my eyes, and realized the most important lesson of my career. It's not about seeking revenge. It was never about revenge. It's about protecting others, about ensuring that victims can rest peacefully without fear, about giving them the strength to be heard when the world tries to silence them. It's about being there when the system lets them down. Because sometimes the system does fail, but mothers do not. The true protectors do not. On that morning when my daughter needed me most, I was there. And that made all the difference. After everything that happened, I realized something important. Justice isn't just a word spoken in court, it's a heartbeat. It's the courage to stand tall when life pushes you down. Sometimes the system breaks, but love, perseverance, and truth have the power to mend it. I learned that even in the darkest times, there is always a way to come back. If we keep fighting for it, if you ever feel trapped or unheard, remember this: silence is no protection. Speaking out can save lives, including your own. If my story resonated with you, perhaps it is because you too believe that strength is born through pain and that healing begins the moment we stop hiding. If you agree or enjoyed my story, please show your support by sending a like. Let's watch our numbers grow. I'm also curious, what city are you from and what time are you listening? Feel free to share that in the comments. If you wish to support my journey, you can make a small donation. Thank you for listening and for sharing your valuable time with me. For more stories like this, I invite you to explore other videos on my channel and to subscribe. On the screen, you'll find two more life stories I believe you'll enjoy.